Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty RoundTable Radio Talk Show.
All right. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman, hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use. It all starts now. Thanks for being alongside for the ride. Our goal to promote God, family, and country, protect life, liberty, and property, and do so on your radio and TV in the traditions of our founding fathers. Rejecting revolution, unless it's Jesus' revolution, then we're in, because we follow the Prince of Peace. Oh, boy, we're going to have Heath Perkins coming up with our Honest Money Report. Count on that. We've got all kinds of strange stuff. It's Kindness Day today. We'll talk about that. Donald Trump. There's so much good and bad about Donald, it's hard to even know what the heck's going on. The government's out of control. We'll talk about it all on the broadcast today. Let's start with World Kindness Day. Did you know today is World Kindness Day? Did you know that it's been recognized on November 13th every year? And what does it do, you ask? It encourages people to be kind. Yeah, encourages people worldwide to perform random acts of kindness. I dig it. Think we ought to have more of it. The event, celebrating its near 30th anniversary, was initiated by the, quote, World Kindness Movement back in 1998. Now, near 30th, I guess, so 98 would be what? 2008? Or 2028 would be the... All right, so we're not quite there, but we're close. Anyway, I like the event. Think it's a wonderful event. Think we ought to have more of it. They've got suggestions for this day that I think are quite interesting as well, and I support. Multiple suggestions for observing the day include things like complimenting someone, holding open doors. Wow. Whoa, can you do that these days? If you're a man, can you hold the door open for a woman nowadays, or are you just a bigot, thug, hater for doing that? Well, everybody that I know, I talk to women everywhere, all over the country, and every one of them says, I kind of like it when someone holds the door open for me. By the way, I'm a guy, and I like it when someone holds the door open for me, too, especially if my hands are full, or especially if, there's several of us in a row, and it's sure easier than trying to handle the door if somebody just steps back and holds the door and everybody else just rolls in. It's just really nice. It's kind. Yeah, so compliment someone, hold open doors. They say donating items like toys and clothes and stuff to shelters, contributing toiletries and other needful supplies to homeless shelters, women's shelters, giving books to libraries, donating to charity. There's so many things you can do to be kind. It's not even funny. Kindness, I don't think there's a list that you can produce. I appreciate some of the suggestions, but I don't think there's really a list to being kind. What about just giving someone a smile? Just smiling at them. What about when you walk up to the cashier and you can tell they've had a hard day and they're flustered and they don't say anything to you? What do you normally do? You think, oh my gosh, they're a grumpy sucker. Okay? But what if you just smile at them and just say, hey, hope your day goes better? Or what if, we can all be kind. And I think it's really important. In fact, President Trump's wife, Melania, created the Be Best campaign, right? And that's all designed to help children not get bullied and not get beat up and all that kind of stuff, right? Anyway, I think it's a great, great initiative by Melania. Now, the problem is everybody just beats up Melania and says, oh, your husband's the biggest unkind guy there is, so what you do doesn't have any sway. And I disagree with that. I think it actually has tremendous sway. Hopefully, if anybody can help Donald be kind, it would be her, right? Charlie Kirk was well known for being kind, right? People would kind of get in his face and be crazy and be like, hold on, prove me wrong. He'd have his bold statement, but at the same time, he'd be willing to step back and listen, right? Anyway, very, very interesting indeed. I want to hold this Kindness Day up and say, I joked at the start of the show before we got on the air with some of my producers and said, hey, we're going to be super kind to you today. And the person said, shouldn't you be kind to me every day? Boy, is she spot on right. Yes, of course. That was the kind of joke leading into what we're talking about today. I appreciate a Kindness Day, and I support one because we certainly need reminders, right? But I think every day ought to be a Kindness Day. I think every day ought to be a Christmas Day or a Thanksgiving Day or a 4th of July Day or I can keep going, right? A Valentine's Day, an Easter Sunday. We can keep going with all these wonderful days that we can celebrate and focus on. And, what about Mom's Day Oh, Mother's Day? Yeah. How about Father's Day? How about Parents' Day? How about Take Your Kid to Work Day? We ought to have more of those, right? I'm just saying. Anyway, I don't know if you know, but there's a big trend going on Twitter, it's going on the internet, I guess. I don't know where it's being published because I don't participate in this kind of stuff. But the USA Today tech section brought this to my attention, and I thought just on Kindness Day we ought to talk about this in contrast. Internet reacts to what's called the flip camera TikTok trend. Some are now calling it bullying, secretism. Here's what happens. They record videos and they share them online with commenters making fun of the unsuspecting and unaware targets. I guess it's on TikTok. And it's left some users sad and in tears as they get mocked and ridiculed and made fun of. They say the videos are a form of cruel bullying. The social media videos, I guess they say they're part of a, quote, flip camera trend where a group of people, usually teenagers, dance past classmates or strangers in public places, and then they record them dancing, kind of catch them in the act. I don't know if you call it candid camera of days of old or what, but they flip the phone backwards so people don't really realize they're being recorded, right? Then they share the videos online for everybody to see. They're completely unaware of what's transpiring. 9 times out of 10, the person looks like the sweetest, most kind, humble, sweetest human being. You could tell they were just trying to be nice. Quiet, introverted, probably not even part of the game being played. They call them names, they mock them, they make fun of them. And see, the problem is the person doesn't even know that they're online being made fun of oftentimes. All right, the person agrees to hold the camera for them to be kind, not to be bullied. Now, to me, what needs to happen is we need to let people know about this flipping the camera trend and flip the camera back. But I don't know how to respond to this because where do we go with this? This is exactly what Melania Trump has been talking about. This bullying online has got to stop. Her Be Best campaign suggests we should be better than this, right? I couldn't agree more with Melania. In fact, we're going to take this initiative and help Melania with this. Okay? We're going to create a BeBestPress.com website. And on BeBestPress.com, we're going to highlight some of these contrasting things. I love World Kindness Day. I want to support it. I reject this flip camera campaign. It's rude, it's mean, it's unkind, it's unacceptable. All right. Anyway, I thought I'd give you that kind of contrast. It's interesting that I see this story in USA Today about the flip camera being mean to people, bullying people online, the same day that's like, what? World, not even national, World Kindness Day, folks. You're in the middle, my fellow Americans, and you got to choose whether you're going to support Satan, evil, bullying, abuse, hostility, anger, hatred, mistrust, or whether you're going to double down and follow the Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ. Kindness, love, patience, forgiveness, acceptance, respect, dignity, honor, integrity. I mean, shall I keep going or do you get the point? I think the point's really clear. You need to decide what's going to govern your actions. And I get teenagers. Sometimes there's bullies in the crowd. Oftentimes when you find a bully in the crowd, it turns out their life isn't very good. They're bullied by someone else. Therefore, they kind of pass the bullying along. A lot of times that happens. But we need to provide real leadership. Most of you need to learn to stand up and say, look, stop it. I'm not doing that. I'm not participating in that. It reminds me of the 2 teenagers, and they saw this guy working in the field, and his shoes were at the edge of the field, and they snuck up and saw his shoes, and one's like, hey, let's put some bad stuff in his shoes so when he comes back, we can watch and laugh. And the other guy's like, no, that's not good. This guy's struggling and working hard. Why don't we put a silver dollar in each of his shoes? So they do. They put a silver dollar in the shoes, and they come back and watch, and they're hidden, and the guy puts on his shoe, puts on the first, man, he finds this coin and looks at it and just starts to cry. Then he starts to put on the other shoe, and oh my goodness, there's a silver dollar in the other shoe as well. And the worker's so happy, he kneels down, thanks God out loud for the blessing, the windfall of money that he got, and how grateful he was. He puts on his shoes and goes on his merry way. And no regrets, people. I recommend we all try to live our lives with no regrets. It is World Kindness Day, recognized on the 13th of November every year, almost 30 years, quote, in business. Are you going to help the event? Are you going to find ways to promote kindness everywhere you go, not only today, but every day? I pray the answer is a resounding yes. And I'm Sam Bushman. This is Liberty Roundtable Live. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman, hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use, continues always when I take to the airwaves. How's that? Promoting God, family, and country, protecting life, liberty, and property, rejecting revolution. Unless it's a Jesus revolution, then we're in because we follow the Prince of Peace. Today is November the 13th in the year of our Lord, 2025. What does that mean? It means today is World Kindness Day, recognized on November 13th each year. It's been going on for almost 30 years, and they really want people to be kind, and I think it's a great idea, but I think we got to do it every day, not just on World Kindness Day. You know what I'm talking about? All right, our next guest is so prolific. He does so many different things that it's hard to keep up with all the awesome things that he's doing. And one of them is he just says, what is it? It's the economy, stupid. That's what you've heard all the time, right? But what about it's the Fed, stupid? That's what we're talking about. We'll do it today with our guest, Mr. Murray Sabrin. Welcome back to Liberty Roundtable Live, sir.
Great to be with you, Sam. Thanks for the invite to educate as many Americans as possible.
So, Doctor, I want to just talk about your kind of mission. Your mission is incredible. To make Americans financially independent again. I love it, and we need it. It's something that really has been lacking. President Trump, and I don't mean to attack the president, but he kind of seems to be stumbling around in the dark on this one.
Well, he's taking us in the opposite direction. But he's just continuing what began under Hoover and Roosevelt and Truman and all the other presidents since the Great Depression, that they believe that the federal government has a responsibility for the well-being of the American people. And my reading of the Declaration and the Constitution says the federal government has no responsibility for the economy. This is the legacy of the Great Depression, where everyone was looking to Washington to solve the downturn in the economy, which was, of course, made worse by Hoover and Roosevelt by their interventionist policies. And so I created this movement at mafeusa.com to really restore the principles of the American Revolution, which is independence. And if we were independent, Sam, there'd be no food stamps, there'd be no Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. People would provide for themselves during their working years for their retirement, work with their families, work with their community to build the institutions which we have in place already. They're called the nonprofit sector, which before the Great Depression, they were called mutual aid societies, where people in local communities all across this country helped each other. We talk about kindness. This was the ultimate kindness of the American people, helping each other in need. They provided unemployment insurance, they provided medical care, they provided all sorts of benefits for people locally because to them, Washington was a very distant place because it was hard to travel prior to the Great Depression to Washington, D.C. And so people realized that if they want to make their lives better, they have to work, they have to create businesses, and they have to work within their own community to help people who are out of luck in their business, in their work.
It's kind of like the barn raising mentality, isn't it?
It's exactly the barn raising mentality. There's a wonderful book that goes into the detail of this. It's called From Mutual Aid to the Welfare State. And it's a wonderful book giving us, the readers, the history of how mutual aid societies were the backbone of local activism. People weren't looking for political solutions, they were looking for local voluntary solutions. And that's the key word, it's voluntary. The welfare state is massive coercion, the redistribution of income and wealth, which is not authorized by the Constitution, but yet here we are with $38 trillion in debt and $2 trillion deficits. And as far as the eye can see, more spending on programs that, from my perspective, are not authorized by Article 1, Section 8. And that's what I wrote in an open letter to President Trump yesterday about the meaning of Thanksgiving. You can read it at my Substack, murraysabrin.substack.com. And I pointed out, in 2 weeks, we're going to be celebrating Thanksgiving. Why do we celebrate Thanksgiving? It's the celebration of free enterprise because the Pilgrims had an experiment in communism, socialism, and they nearly starved to death
And that
because
was under Governor Bradford, correct?
absolutely. I mean, I linked to the articles written by economics professor Richard Eberling, who's written magnificent work on this subject, and that Thanksgiving is really the celebration of free enterprise, private property, individual rights. And it's going to be interesting this Thanksgiving if the mayor-elect of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, an avowed socialist, will be celebrating Thanksgiving, because if he does, he'll be celebrating free enterprise.
All right, let's talk about this a little bit because it seems to me that President Trump should know this. He's been a businessman. He's known as the art of the deal guy. I mean, he should really know better. Is he just surrounded by the wrong people? How does he live in this country as long as he has? I mean, the guy's 80 years old or whatever. And I mean, I know about this. You know about this. America, does he really not know,
I
Doctor?
believe he really does not know. I don't think he's a well-read individual. I don't think he's read the things that you and I have read. I've been reading this material since the late '60s, early '70s, and I embraced it because it just made common sense about morality, about the relationship between the individual and the government. And he has this strange notion about trade and tariffs that really just sound more like left wing propaganda that somehow foreign companies or countries are ripping us off. I don't know. I've never spoken to anybody in New Jersey when I lived there or in Florida where I live now who say they're being ripped off by foreign companies because they buy products that are made overseas. This makes no sense to me. The people want to get the most value for their dollars, the dollars that they earned in the marketplace, and they do so by buying stuff in the marketplace that satisfy their goals and needs. And the reason that Trump is so fixated on China and other countries that sell to us is because back in the '80s he was worrying about Japan, how they're going to take over America. Well, Japan overpaid for trophy products in the United States, like Rockefeller Center, some major golf courses, and they didn't take over the world. They had their own problems. I believe, as the Declaration says, we are entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That means, as far as I'm concerned, that we have to trade with people that we are confident in, that we're going to get good value for the dollars that we spend in the marketplace. And that means domestically and internationally, because all these borders are just arbitrary nation state borders. They're not economic borders. Goods flow freely across the United States, and that's what makes the United States an economic powerhouse because we have free trade among the 50 states. Could you imagine if we had customs officials at each border? It would be a nightmare for the American people and for American businesses. Instead, people can buy anything from anywhere, go online, order it wherever they can, and it gets shipped to them in a few days. This is the essence of a free enterprise economy where people and businesses get together and mutually benefit from the trade that they engage in.
Let me ask you this. How do we get to President Trump? You would think some of the financial advisors around him would know. Even Alan Greenspan back in the day, he was a gold guy
Yeah,
until he became a Federal Reserve guy.
right.
then he wasn't a gold guy anymore. I mean, we see evidence of this reality check everywhere we go. Now, it used to be a silver dollar, said Silver Eagle, silver dollar on it. The United States was a dollar. Now it takes, I just had my gold guy on last hour with us. Now it takes $53 to buy a silver dollar.
Yep,
If it's
yep. They
gold, it used
still,
to be a $20 gold piece. Now it costs you $4,200, and people don't get it.
this is the sad reality of having central banks. Central banks do one thing very well. They debase the currency, which means that the purchasing power of the currency goes down, prices go up. This has been the history of banking, of kings, of sovereigns, by diluting the metal content of coins, whether it's silver coins or gold coins throughout history. And then when the central banking was created, the banks can create money. The central banks can create money, and the commercial banks are in league with them because it was the commercial banks that wanted a central bank as a backstop, as a lender of last resort when they get into trouble, because banks have a flawed business model. It's called borrowing short and lend long. And that's happened throughout American history. And that's why we have had bank panics since 1819 throughout American history. And then when the central bank was created, the Federal Reserve in 1913, it was supposed to stop that. But instead, It exacerbated the problem because a few years after the central bank was created, what happened? We got the Great Depression. That was not supposed to happen under central banking. And so I've advocated going back to the gold standard, which is real money. Paper and our checking accounts and savings accounts online are money substitutes. They're not the real thing. And so the American people have to learn that. And the best place to learn that is in Murray Rothbard's essay, what has government done to our money, which is available free at the Mises Institute, either online or you can get a hard copy just by applying online at Mises.org. And Rothbard was a member of my dissertation committee back in the 70s when I was doing a dissertation on inflation, and he was an outside member when I was at Rutgers. And so I learned from him, from his writings, from the other Austrian school economists, about the nature of money and banking, how inflation is such an insidious process. It's like the termites undermining the foundation of a house. That's what inflation does. It undermines the
All right, hang
economy.
tight, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Murray Sabrin with me. Hang tight. You're watching Liberty Roundtable Live. Dr. Murray Sabrin with me, ladies and gentlemen. He's known as the financial truth teller, ladies and gentlemen. He's an economist. He's an author. He's a public speaker. He's a consultant to help families. Meet murraysabrin.com or murraysabrin.substack.com. He's helping leaders, businesses, and families achieve real financial independence with strategies grounded in truth, liberty. Wow, what the heck's going on? How come we haven't got a meeting with Dr. Sabrin and Donald Trump where they could sit down and say, hey, we're going to shut down the Federal Reserve altogether. It's a clown show. It's got to stop. They're criminal banking cartel. I mean, come on. When are we going to have real conversations in America, Doctor?
Well, I'm not that far from Mar-a-Lago. I'm on the west coast of Florida. The president's on the east coast. I think it's about a 2-hour drive from Naples, Florida, where I live, to Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach County. I'd be happy to meet with the president and go over what I know about government, about business. And we're both contemporaries. We're both born in the same year, so we have similar experiences. He in of course, the real estate sector. I as an academic, where I taught financial history in the United States, and I can explain that where we're headed is a very uh, financially distressful place because all the pieces are falling into place, Sam, where we could have, and I really believe this, we could have a crisis in 2029 similar to what we had in 1929, because all the research I've done for the past 50 years reveal that all the things that happened in the 1920s, which culminated in the stock market crash in October 1929, are happening right now. That doesn't mean a stock market crash is imminent. It just means it's building. And the thing that really concerns me, and I think it concerns a lot of Americans, is the national debt and the interest on the national debt and the deficits that we're having and the spending that we're having, which are unsustainable. And this is the first time in American history where the government doesn't have a good grasp of its finances, and that's why we have these periodic shutdowns. And for me, they really need to have a debate in Washington that talks about what should the government spend money on based upon the oath that they took to uphold the Constitution, because everyone that's spending voting for all these expenditures are violating their oath of office to uphold the Constitution. You have Democrats talking about we have to abide by the Constitution. Well, we haven't abided by the Constitution since the 1930s, and that's why government spending has been on an upward swing under both Republicans and Democrats. Even though Republicans claim they're fiscal conservatives, they've
Well,
done nothing.
it's like a
They've done nothing.
bipartisan it's like a bipartisan runaway freight train is what's really happened, ladies and gentlemen. Look, here's my fear. My fear is here's what they're going to do. They're going to create a digital currency via the Fed. They're going to claim that, hey, you know what, the blockchain's fantastic. They're going to tell you that crypto's phenomenal, but we just can't have these entities running around and manipulating, changing the money supply. So we got to have the feds in control of it. They might tempt us into it by offering a quote jubilee. They might say, hey, we'll forgive all your debts if you just go to this digital system. Ladies and gentlemen, we're at a serious crossroads in America. The debts become so great. Eventually there's going to be no money except to pay the interest on the debt because we've been fleeced and lied to and ripped off. They create $100 bill and it cost them literally like 13 cents to create it. Then they lie and claim it's worth $100. Then they charge compound interest on the thing. It's just out of control, folks. But here's the good news. There's a call by Dr. Sabrin for financial independence. As we approach the 250th year anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, it's time for America's independence, ladies and gentlemen. We got to make Americans financially independent again. And so you got to learn this kind of, I don't know what you call it, acronym or whatever, MAFI USA, MAFI USA. MAFI, make Americans financially independent, is kind of the idea. And we can do this, but it's going to take not only the president, it's going to take Congress, it's going to take all of us to double down on this. I think it's the biggest threat we face. Fake money, dishonest money. Because at the end of the day, at every single juncture, every transaction becomes fraudulent in a real sense. Have I stated it too far, Doctor?
No, you're right on target, Sam, because this has been building like a volcano. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes years, decades, even centuries for a volcano to explode. I think we're seeing a financial volcano in the United States. This has been going on literally since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, and we had an eruption in 1929 to 33, the beginning of the Great Depression. We had one with the dot-com bubble. We had one with the housing bubble. Now we have what people have called the everything bubble. Everything's inflated. The stock market's inflated. The real estate market's inflated. We have an inflation, if you will, of the number of people that are dependent on the federal government. This is extraordinary. We have tens of millions of Americans that depend upon the federal government for the necessities of life. That's not a free society. That's not free enterprise. This is the welfare state run amok. And when I was growing up back in New York City in the 1950s, I saw my father go to work, bring home a paycheck, pay for the bills. We weren't on welfare. He didn't expect anything from the New York City government, the state government, the federal government. And that was my worldview back then. And so, what were my marching orders as a kid? Get an education so you could become a professional. So I studied and studied till I got a PhD, and then got my dream job of teaching at the college level in 1985. And it was a great experience to help young people in the business school learn the skills. I taught finance that would help them in their careers or opening up a business. And this is what America's all about, having people teach young people in order for them to be financially independent. And so we need to have that ethic brought back into the schools from kindergarten all the way up to through the college. We need to have public opinion leaders talk about the principles of economics, the laws of economics, the principles of finance, which are the foundation of a free society and a prosperous society, instead of all the manipulation goes on by the Federal Reserve, by Washington, with changing the tax code every 2 years. This is not what's going to promote a sound economy. In fact, we're headed off a financial cliff. And I think in their hearts of hearts, people in Washington know this, but politically, they're frozen because if you dare speak about cutting benefits, people go absolutely bonkers because they think they're entitled to other people's money, with the federal government acting as sort of the middleman, the money launderer of the people who pay taxes and the people who get those tax benefits. So that's why I created the Mafia movement, mafiausa.com. And I'm hoping that everyone gets their hat, creates Mafia chapters all across the country. This is not a top-down approach. This is a grassroots movement for people to say, what can I do in my own life to be financially independent so I don't have to rely on the federal government for all these programs? Then hopefully people in Washington will get the message and start reducing the size and scope of government and reducing taxes so people will have the wherewithal to become more financially independent.
So I know this requires a little bit of crystal ball, but what do you think? Do you think they're going to come to their senses and listen to people like you and me? Right now, Donald Trump's saying, "Hey, I want to give everybody a $2,000 stimulus bump because of hey, we're bringing in so much money from the tariffs. The problem is we pay the tariffs, then he gives us money back. The problem is the double. If you pay everybody $2,000 like he's talking about, it'd be double what we bring in from the increased tariffs that he's got in the first place. Then he says, hey, not only do I want to give everybody $2,000, I want to try to make mortgages 50 years, no big deal. 30 years, 40 years, no big deal. We already pay triple for our houses as it is with the belligerent, dishonest, usury interest that we have. It's against biblical principles. It's against the Christian moral ethics. Everything about it is wrong, but yet there's not even genuine conversations going. Do you think that they're going to listen to us and wake up, or do you think we're just going to head to the abyss,
Well,
Doctor?
here's what happened. Historically, whenever there's a crisis, government expands, but it never recedes after the crisis is over. This has been the ratchet effect throughout American
Yes.
history, documented beautifully by Robert Higgs in his book, Crisis and Leviathan, where he points this out. And so, if I'm right and the next crisis occurs by the end of this decade, beginning of the 2030s, then the people in Washington and the American people will have to make a decision. Do they want government more involved in our lives or less involved in our lives? And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing to present the alternative to the current status quo, because the status quo is basically the result of Democrats pushing big government policies. And when the Republicans had the power, they basically preserved those policies. They didn't cut anything back from the New Deal and Great Society programs. In fact, Reagan ran on a platform of getting rid of the Department of Education, the Department of Energy. They're still going strong, spending tens of billions of dollars that we don't have because all that money has to be borrowed because of the $2 trillion deficit. So again, what we need to do, Sam, is with your help, with other people's help around the country, is have people go to mafiausa.com, get their hat, create these clubs around the country, talk about what needs to be done. I'm going to put up a reading list on the website soon of basic material that people should read to educate themselves so that they can write letters to the editor, they can write their congressman, they can write their senator and say, listen, I don't want to be dependent upon the government in my old age. I don't want to be dependent upon the government right now. I want to be a free and independent individual, which is my God-given right as a human being. It's stated right there in the Declaration. And so, Mr. Congressman, Ms. Congressman, you have a responsibility to make sure that the government is not on our back, and we can
Amen
be.
to that. I hope your book list starts with a creature from Jekyll Island, and then the next one on there is Pieces of Eight. And then, of course, we got to have the book from Mutual Aid to the
Yeah.
welfare state. We got to have that on there. There's a lot of great reading, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking to Dr. Murray Sabrin. He's got a mission, folks. Make Americans financially independent. You got to dig it. Affordability. It's the Fed, stupid. Let's talk about that more because everybody wants to race to the affordability bandwagon. How does it relate to you and I? We'll tell you in seconds. You're watching and listening to the Liberty Roundtable Live. Dr. Murray Sabrin with me, ladies and gentlemen. I was about to say, Dr. Sabrin, a penny for your thoughts, but we don't have pennies anymore. Penny's gone now, 232 years old. They had to get rid of it because it cost too much to produce it. It's worthless. And now, just so you know, even a nickel costs too much to produce. A nickel costs about 8-10 cents to produce, and so nickels are a failure as well. So, you know, when you say, hey, kid, you want I guess a wooden nickel is maybe better than the... Anyway, very, very strange indeed. But it shows you the erosion of the costs, okay? And I say this, the shutdown ends, and D.C. goes right back to writing checks that will bankrupt America. I mean, every single nation historically that's embraced fake money, fiat currency, dishonest wages, if you will, has failed, Dr. Sabrin. Do you want to respond to that? Every
Oh,
one of
there's
them.
no question about it. I mean, look what happened in the 20th century. Russia had hyperinflation during World War One, and Lenin was able to take over Russia on three promises: bread, land, and peace. And the peasants didn't know anything about communism. All they knew is that their sons were getting killed in the war. They were serfs under the czar, and
Yeah,
they
we
wanted.
want peace and we need bread.
And then what happened right afterwards? Germany had hyperinflation after World War One as they printed money to pay for the reparations and other things. And 10
And then
years
what you had to do, bring a wheelbarrow for a currency to get a loaf of bread? Is that what had to happen?
and then Hitler tried to take over power in November of 23. He was arrested, went to jail, wrote Mein Kampf, and they say the rest is history. Go back to at the end of World War II. Chinese nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek printed up currency in China. Hyperinflation took hold. The peasants embraced Mao Zedong, even though they knew nothing about communism. And the communists took over China in 1949. So again, three examples of hyperinflation in the 20th century, and they all led to totalitarianism and the mass destruction of people in those three countries. So
And I
again,
would say this in previous cultures, in many ways, it's hard to blame them because maybe they didn't know better, maybe they didn't have the information, have the knowledge. In our case, we have so much ability to gain knowledge and know the truth. Okay, the books that have been written, you're a prolific author highlighting this. You're incredible, murraysavrin.substack.com, and other places where people can really learn what's going on from an economic point of view. We don't have the excuses that these other cultures had either, Doctor.
well, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is my last rodeo. I spent 35 years in the classroom teaching financial history and other finance subjects. And I said, I think I personally I have an obligation to educate as many Americans about the need to be financially independent so we're not relying on the government for our basic necessities of life. And I think, the real tragedy of what's happened politically and socially and economically in this country is that we've gone away from the principles of the Declaration and limited constitutional government uh, uh, outlined in Article 1, Section 8, and people are clamoring for more government solutions. The mayor elect in New York City, his whole thing was affordability. Well, if he knew anything about money and banking, he would blame the Fed, which is located in Manhattan on Liberty Street, which is ironic. It's the Fed, New York Fed, is located on Liberty Street, and he would say we need to go back to sound money so prices would fall for the average worker and they could afford things. We need to get rid of regulations that stifle the supply of housing. That causes uh, housing prices to be higher than they otherwise would. But it's really the Fed that really is driving the affordability issue in the United States. That's why I should be on every major radio show in the country, TV show, talking about the Fed. But the Fed is so powerful that it's very hard to have my voice and other voices get on the air and point the finger at the Fed because they are the engine of inflation, which I wrote about in my book, Why the Federal Reserve Sucks. And it just outlines exactly what central banking has done in the United States, how the banks colluded with the politicians to give us the Federal Reserve with the secret meeting at Jekyll Island in 1910. And the bankers realized this is a great way to get protection from the government. So again, here's another example of people who supposedly are in the private sector and support free enterprise that want government protection.
The Federal Reserve Sucks is a book you wrote, right?
Absolutely. It talks about all the bubbles that are created by the Federal Reserve. It talks about the boom bust cycle. And here's the other thing: the Federal Reserve is the engine of inequality. So when AOC and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren decry the widening inequality in the United States, it's because of the Federal Reserve by inflating asset prices. And who owns asset prices? The top 10% of Americans. So again, it's pretty easy to understand this, Sam. All you need to do is understand how the Federal Reserve works, how central banking works, how money spreads through the economy, how asset prices are lifted by this new money that's being created. And it's not hard to understand it. As they say, it's not complicated. It's the Fed, stupid.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. So let's talk really quick before the program ends because this is Solutions Radio. I always want to end on solutions, Doctor.
Sure.
It's one thing to complain a lot about the problems, and we do plenty of that because it's justified. But I always want to be the solutions guy. If somebody goes, well, Sam, what do you recommend then? I want to be able to say, hey, all you got to do is, follow our guidance and advice. How do you think we can unwind this curse, this plague from the United States called the Federal Reserve? What steps do we need to take? What could Donald do to lock his presidential service down in history as the best ever? What would it take? What do we do?
Well, the first thing he should do is address the nation, talk about why prices are so high. And if he ignores this problem, then I think he will have a failed presidency for the next 3 years. He has to address the issue. Prices are high because the Federal Reserve prints money. It manipulates interest rates. He needs to have a forum in Washington, D.C. of critics of the Fed and the Fed officials and hash out in 1 or 2 days what the Fed has done, that it takes its lead from a failed philosophy, ideology of money printing, money creation is good for the economy. No, it's not. What's good for the economy is capital investment. What's good for the economy is freedom. What's good for the economy is private property, individual rights. Those are the elements, if you will, that gives us sustainable prosperity. All the Fed does is dilute the purchasing power of the dollar, gives us these boom bust cycles, and that's why I wrote Navigating the Boom Bust Cycle. And if people go to murraysabrin.com or Matt for USA and send me their email, I'll send you the introduction to that book, and they can see the valuable information that's in there. And it's subtitled An Entrepreneur Survival Guide. Because if I'm correct, and we're going to see another major financial crisis, you better start preparing now, because in the next 3 years, if you're not prepared for what could be a major economic downturn, financial crisis, then you are going to be hurt financially because of all the manipulation going on by the Federal Reserve.
I do have to take a little bit of issue with your book's name, though. You say why the Federal Reserve sucks. And I think the Federal Reserve sucks if you're an honest person. And I think the Federal Reserve sucks if you want to tell the truth, if you want to be a truth teller. I think the Federal Reserve sucks if you want prosperity for Americans and the free market to work. But the Federal Reserve doesn't suck. It's perfect at destroying a country. It's perfect
Sure.
at robbing the American people of their wealth and their stability and their financial assurity and their liberty, ultimately. It doesn't suck at that. It's incredible at it. So the question becomes, those who put this in place, some may have been ignorant along the way, but others have this evil, satanic, perverted design. And that's really at the core of this too. And I know people don't want to say that because it's like, oh man, are you a nut? No, but you can see the writing on the wall. Why would you ever put this in place when it's so destructive if you truly cared? And so it sucks for you and me, yes. Your title's perfect. But in reality, that's their agenda, and it doesn't suck. It's perfect at doing those things of destruction, Doctor.
Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, this is the theme throughout American history and world history: power versus liberty. And if people embrace liberty, then they will be opposed to the income tax. They'll be opposed to all the deep state. They'll be opposed to the military-industrial complex, which President Eisenhower warned us about in his farewell address in 1961. Will be opposed to all these endless wars. Will be opposed to these regulations which stifle small businesses. And we will talk about freedom and free enterprise and individual rights. That is the essence of why the colonists revolted against Great Britain. They wanted to be free and independent of Great Britain and wanted to have their own um, future determined by them, not by Great Britain. And so we need to re-emphasize that principle as we approach the 250th anniversary of the Declaration.
MAFI, Make America Financially Independent, MAFIUSA.com. Get your hat to learn more. Dr. Murray Sabrin doing a great job highlighting this for us. If you want to keep an eye on his incredible writings, you just got to go to murraysavrin.substack.com and check that out. I really want to kind of help people understand this too. We can't solve all of our problems at once, but it does indeed start with education. And then it starts with the American people doing what they can to become independent. And the best way to do that is to get out of debt personally. You can do it. It's hard, but it can be done. And then to live within your means. We don't have to have these massive houses. We don't have to have, we live like rock star kings most of the time. And what we really need to do is kind of say, hey, my independence is greater than living like a king. And we can still have very nice accommodations. Don't misunderstand me. But I think there's a frugal reality based on an asset-based economy as opposed to a debt-based economy that's it's at the core, it's at the center, it's in the veins of either a debt-based criminal society where everybody wants to be on the take, vote largesse from the Treasury, versus an asset-based system which encourages savings and prosperity and stability and getting out of debt and more. Dr. Sabrin, thank you so much, my friend. We'll have you back. We congratulate you on your tour. We think we ought to take it to the National Press Club. Let me know when you want to go there, and I'll help.
Thanks so much, Sam. It's great to be with you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to inform your listeners about the MAFI movement.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Make America Financially Independent. MAFIUSA.com. Become part of the solution today, would you please? I'm Sam Bushman. You're watching and listening to Liberty Roundtable Live. Spread the word, share the love, and know that we're syndicated by the Loving Liberty Networks. LovingLiberty.net. I'm Sam Bushman. God save the Republic of the United States of America.